Yeah, well, you know, that's like just your opinion, man.
So hello, and welcome to the Audio Opinion Show, where audio people have a show and have opinions about things. That's pretty much it. That's it. There's nothing more fancy about it than that. I'm joined by my good friend Andy Broughton, who co-hosts with me. Although I just sort of jumped in from the beginning of this without asking him if he wanted to do the intro. So I don't know. There may be bitterness. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. I'm joined by some of my dearest, oldest friends, Kate Brown, who I've known for minutes, and you know, the stories that we could tell, and and some of my other friends, many Petes, many Andys. You know, we all do various audio things. We are, in all seriousness, a lot of live audio folks who do live events, either in churches or in corporate things or concerts or whatever. That's kind of the kind of people that we are joined.
Centuries of experience here.
There are centuries of experience, a lot of gray hair. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and start off our little happy experience by, first of all, closing this window so I can stop being distracted. And then we're going to bring up the most important poll, which is the first poll. I'm going to launch the poll. Poll has now been launched. I will read the poll because no one on YouTube can see it because Zoom is stupid. Very important question. What is the most dangerous place to be in the movie The Princess Bride? Is it 1, the fire swamp, 2, the pit of despair, 3, the cliffs of insanity, or 4, Prince Humperdinck's castle?
I'd like to know where the fire swamp is.
Well, I typed fast, all right? So the fire swamp.
It's outside of Cleveland, I believe.
Possibly. Entirely
the
possible.
ROUSs are?
Yes. The rodents of unusual size, I don't think they exist.
Except for in Cleveland.
Except for in Cleveland. All right, I see 7 voters. There are 9 of us here, and I don't really get a vote. But this is the practice poll. Okay, I think we got a quorum. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and I am going to share the results. And according to this group, the 2 most dangerous places are the fire swamp and the pit of despair. However, you are all wrong, and it wasn't a trick question for once. The actual answer is Prince Humperdinck's castle. The reason the answer is Prince Humperdinck's castle is because it's the only place somebody dies in the movie. Clearly the most dangerous place to be. Everywhere else, they talk about how dangerous it is, but nobody actually dies. So I'm sorry.
Danger and death are different things.
I have a different opinion. I would feel like most dangerous would be thing that causes possible death.
Possible death. See,
I knew he was going to jump on that. I literally, as it came, the words came out of my mouth. I'm like, Foley is going to jump on possible. Anyway, that, believe it or not, is not the most important question, although it's the most important question to me. So here, let's go ahead and launch a poll to figure out what we're actually going to talk about tonight on the Audio Opinion Show. So tonight, what's our topic for today? So there are 4 possibilities. Possibility number 1, throw and go mixing versus touring mixer. Which one do we think is more difficult? Running in and doing festivals and quick one-offs, or being that person who's like mixing day after day after day, the same band. As somebody said earlier on the Signal to Noise podcast's Facebook page, like scalpel mixing. Number 2, is it a better idea to tweak the gear, i.e. change the gear you're using, or just tweak what you've got, i.e. manipulate what you have to get the best possible result? We can talk about whether I mean it's the best idea or takes the most skill or whatever. Number 3, what's our favorite audio myth? Myth, yes. So what's our favorite audio myth? And 4th, which do we think is more difficult or more challenging, and that is live versus broadcast in audio engineering? Which do we think takes more skill? And since I do mostly broadcast,
A lot of good ones. I don't know.
These are great topics, and I wish I could vote.
Can I vote for more than one?
I should have actually
my vote in
enabled
there?
that. Well,
Ranked voting. We could
where's
set a
ranked
precedent
choice?
for the rest of the world.
Well, didn't New York City just do ranked choice for their mayoral?
Exactly. The most confusing voting method in the world.
Well, and Broughton, you need to. I cheat. I put myself
I know,
into
I
the
gotta put a
meeting
second one in
twice,
there.
so that I can. I've got several
know,
computers
I mean-
here, so I am thinking about actually adding more computers so that I can completely stack the
You can
deck.
really
because
vote. I want 5 votes.
I'm not super interested in this being fair. Okay, I think we've filled enough
8 out of
time.
9,
We've
that's
got
probably
that's probably it. Okay, so we're gonna end the poll, and we're going to share the results. And it would appear that tonight we are going to talk about
What Pete wants to talk
approaches to getting the best audio. Do you tweak the gear? Let me rephrase. Do you change out what you have to something different in order to achieve a better sound? Or do you use what you have and adjust it, tweak it appropriately to get a better sound? What's the better approach? Open-ended
Or-
question, or
Is it which is easier to do, or which is how do you do these things if you need to do them?
open-ended question.
Either one. Yeah.
Pete, Wiejaczka, only because I haven't picked on you in a long time.
Oh,
Start
no.
out by saying something.
Well, I
don't
wanted
even
some
care, and then
clarity
we'll go
from
there.
Erskine about the intent of this topic because was it what Brian said, or were you alluding more to like manufacturer modifications?
Sort of both. I've been on shows where everything's
Start us off, Pete.
according to the sound person, and they went over in the shop and they got all their favorite stuff. And you go out on tour, and of course it sounds the same every single night, and they're really great. And then they're thrown into a festival stage where they can't use their own gear, and their talent is making the festival stage sound like their regular system. And I've known a couple of guys that just play a piece of music, tune it up, and it sounds like their regular show.
Okay,
That's
thanks
hard
for the
to do.
clarity.
Yeah, so it's basically we're talking about
It's all
two
the
different
same.
options.
Yeah.
Two different options, and some of it I think would be what do you think is more challenging? Maybe, I don't know. What do you think? Go ahead, Pete. Just say words.
I'm ready.
All right.
Okay,
Go for
okay.
it.
My official answer is, wait for it, it depends.
I'm shocked.
Not where depends.
No.
Oh, it depends because it depends on, number one, where are you in the food chain of the decision-making process? Are you designing the system? Are you designing the system for a RFP to pick a vendor, or do you work for the vendor and designing the system with what the vendor owns? Two different things there. And then if you're below that hierarchy and you're using something that's been designed, then you step into that gray area of, do you use what you have to the best of your abilities to achieve, acceptability or perfection, or do you, pull some favors and ask for some things that maybe weren't thought of? And so that's where the depends is. And it depends on, on the dependent relationship that you have with usually the gear vendor or the person paying for the gear, so that, maybe you can trade out some different items for what you actually could need. Like, let's say in a ballroom, when the project was bid, it was bid with 2 6-deep line array clusters. Name your speaker of choice, doesn't really matter. But now the set goes all the way to the ceiling and you have to use point source speakers. And, it's a very different design and a very different approach, but probably the right thing in the right circumstance. And so, it just depends. But to the example of the festival situation, you know, there is a skill set that, you know, you have people that work for places that have gear that say that the only way that they can be consistent with their services is by using the same gear every day, which is more towards that touring mentality or working for a vendor mentality. And then you have other people that say, you know, it doesn't really matter as long as like I have one of these 3 consoles and, you know, this thing to control whatever speakers there are, then I can make anything work. And I think the larger majority of mixers or sound designers are of the latter, of like, you know, pretty much making whatever we work. And I think the reason for that is we've all grown up in clubs or churches or somewhere with really bad gear. And so we've learned how to like wade the waters of that, you know, and I mean, you know, and that,
yeah. I'm sorry, Pete.
No, go ahead.
You sounded like you were rapping,
Yes,
and maybe, you know, to narrow the question a little bit in this, you know, and make it really, which one do we think requires more skill? Do we think that it requires more skill to spec a PA top to bottom to get the sound that you want, or to be placed in front of whatever it is you're placed in front of and get the best possible result out of it? Andy Broughton, you have an opinion.
I do. I'm always really, really impressed by the sound engineers that work for even local clubs and things like this, where they get a really mediocre or terrible band to sound listenable. I think it's the easiest way to be a great sound man is to work for a great band. You work for a great band who backs you up, who allows you to spec whatever you want and get the best gear. You're going to be a great sound man. The ones who have to use whatever the equipment du jour is and make it sound even listenable when it's, you know, subpar equipment, I'm really impressed by those people. I think that's a huge skill. If you can make something fairly consistent on any kind of equipment that you're using, I think that's a huge skill. That's really good to spec equipment and make it sound great because you've got all the choice and you picked all the right gear, and that's a lot easier. I think way easier. The end.
I agree with you. And the reason I agree with you is the same reason why, like, you don't use all the bells and whistles of a piece of equipment when you're in the initial design phase. And because you may need to pull them out later when something crazy happens. And so in terms of what you just said, I mean, I've been on very large systems where I've had to pull out skills that I learned in bar mixing before to get through a situation, whatever that is, you know, executive in the middle of the room in front of the PA, or some failure of some sort or whatever. And so I think you're on to something there, Andy.
We're having entirely too much agreement. Angelo, I saw that hand.
I'm thinking that how many of us are going to be in front of a PA that we didn't spec anyways?
Me, a lot, all the time.
I do both. I go on tour with the equipment that I spec, and I also do shows where I'm just walking in working for some sound company.
So the skill set's got to be right up top shelf in both areas.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, Angelo, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you mix in a church primarily, right? So you mix on
primarily,
the same...
right? Yeah. So all the circumstances are always the same. Usually, you know who all of the band's going to be. The sessions morph from 2020 to 2021.
Right. And do you have input on did you have input on the PA that was put in there, or was it basically there when you got there?
It was there when I got there.
So at a certain point, we are talking about you're placed in a situation where the only way you're going to get different gear is you're going to have to send it up the food chain and say, I need y'all to buy me this, and this.
Or when it becomes the end of life.
Yeah, you have to bend the truth slightly and say, yeah, that thing I got 2 years ago is reaching end of life, and I think we may need to replace it because I really need something that sounds better. But you're still in a situation that you were placed in a circumstance with an existing system that you didn't have a whole lot of say over, and you just have to make it work the best. But you get to do the same system every week.
Exactly.
Only experience will tell you what's the weakest link, what's the weak link in that rig. If you don't have enough time with various pieces of equipment, if you're always using the same equipment all the time, you may not, and then you get to use somebody else's equipment, you may not know why that system sounds badly. It sounds bad until you've had experience with a bunch of different things to go, oh, that's a good one and that's a bad one. I see why.
Or it just might be able to.
Yeah, but if you spend a whole bunch of time with, but if you spend a whole bunch of time with the same system, doesn't matter who comes and plays on it, it should still sound great.
No.
Should,
but the source is everything, right? So
and I've definitely done a bunch of shows where, like, I've come into a venue as a freelancer or something along those lines, and I have to use whatever's hanging in the room. And there are a number of those venues here in town where the PAs are not what I would prefer them to be, for a number of different reasons. Not even necessarily the speaker brand or whatever is bad or something, but like, you just have too wide of a beam spread in a very narrow, very reflective hall, and now you're just fighting reflection all day long because someone didn't spec a cabinet that was more suited for the space, because someone told them, oh, this is an array, and arrays are better than a point source in all circumstances, except that's not necessarily true. And so I definitely find it to be a real skill to be able to come in and tweak a space and tweak a PA and make it work. And I work with a number of people who are not given that opportunity, and some of them are young and just came up and got dropped into a space where everything's already set up and you sit behind the console and you mix a show. And so they don't know how to tweak that PA or how to play with that system to make it sound better. And they may have never had to go work on another system and had the opportunity to play with that system. And I feel like they're really missing out.
It's like the cook who says, the cook comes in and goes, okay, you got these 5 ingredients, make me something delicious. So if you're a sound person and you've worked with a bunch of different equipment, you go, oh, okay, I think I know where the limitations are of that, and I can, make a go of it with that stuff. The way the cook could go, well, I've worked with these different ingredients, so I think I can make something out of that. And other people go, oh, it's not the stuff I normally use. I don't know what to do with that. I can't make anything out of that.
I think that's a good analogy. It's like chef, like who's the more skilled chef, the one that you can hand them 5 things and they can make a palatable dish, or the one who has the sky as the limit and then they can make something delicious? Kate, I saw your hand before Joe opened his big fat mouth. So
sorry, Joe.
So much friendliness, so much
there were
love
lots
in the
of
room.
hands in amongst all the other talks.
Go, Kate.
Okay. Well, I feel for the client, it's best to, if you can switch out gear, to have the right gear to achieve the goal in their time frame, in their load and schedule, everything like that. That's really the thing to do. But I gotta say, as a system person, nothing feels more cool than being in a pinch and making things that should not work together and make dreams come true. It's really good for my audio ego. It feels so good. I know that's not always the right answer, but it's fun when you're stuck in that position. You're like, oh, okay, maybe I earned my pay today. I don't know. So
no, that's good.
That's
sorry. I did not mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Keep going. Fine.
But I will say I watched an A1 that I work with, who's an old touring guy, and we were doing a corporate gig, and the house changed the power overnight and turned off everything, changed the power from to 208 overnight. So when we turned on the switch, everything smoked and lit up. And he went ahead and he took the tiniest Mackie mixer I've ever seen and mixed a corporate gig on him. He's like, it's fine, I got this. I've never seen that before. That was incredible. I think that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And it was at, I don't want to name the conference, but it was one where lots of people would know what they're hearing. And he made it happen. I was like, okay, you're the coolest. Like, you're really the coolest. So I think it's, I think that to have that skill set as a person is like truly, truly, truly incredible. But of the client, for the sake of everybody's sanity, if you can switch out to the right gear, that's probably the right move.
When you're thinking about your client too, you got to think about the idea of, okay, can I make this work? Right? You're putting your reputation there and going, here's the stuff that I'm going to give you. And you can look at it and go, I don't know that I'm going to be able to make that happen. So I need to change out these things. Otherwise, I can't give you the show that you're asking me to do. To know that and to be able to stand up for yourself and go, you're not giving me enough tools to work with here. That's also a huge skill that's important. And a lot of people just throw themselves under the bus by going, yeah, whatever you got, I'll make it work. And then it doesn't go well. There's a whole bunch of things.
It can be a trap. It can be a trap.
It's like, I'm trying to be easygoing. I'll just use whatever you give me.
I think what a lot of this is coming down to is basically experience versus inexperience. And if you are experienced and your $100,000 digital mixer blows up and you've got a show to get on, then you can make it work with a Mackie, but part of the experience thing in terms of things about equipment and so on is sometimes the experience is what you need to be able to say to the client, to the people making the decisions, this piece of equipment is not adequate. It's not the right piece of equipment for the job. And a couple of examples, one recent example is the last tour I did. The in-ear system that they were using was name brand, popular. And my experience with this particular product line is that over the last 6 or 7 years, as I've seen it get into more challenging RF environments, I've seen it not perform very well. And we were in pre-production, and the rehearsal studio, this was over in England, the rehearsal studio happened to be about 400 meters from a cell tower. And the ears were just not doing what they oughta. And this is in pre-production. This is not in every arena in the world. This is in pre-production, and they're going spit, pop, crack. And I talked to the monitor engineer. He walked it around. He goes, that's not right. And he was used to using that product. And so I had said, listen, if you want this to work and you want it to work in every city that we're going to, then we need to switch to, I will say what the product we were switching to was, which was the PSM 1000s. And that worked. And so, that was a case of like, I think if I just gone, shit, man, I can make anything work, no matter what, like the ears just wouldn't have been as good. And a much, much older example, in the 80s, I mixed this 9-piece Latin jazz band, and one of the keyboard players went out and bought himself a mixer. And he didn't talk to me about it or anything. And the mixer he got was a piece of crap. And in particular, it was a piece of crap because it buzzed and hummed. And so we would set up and do sound check, and the keyboards would be making noise, and the band would all go off to dinner, and I would spend my dinner break trying to get this thing to be quiet. And one time the band leader, who happened to be my brother, said to me, how come when we start the show with this, keyboard part that's, like a really important part, like sometimes it's really quiet and sometimes it's where it's supposed to be. And I go, that's because that goddamn mixer is like, I spend, while you guys are in catering, I'm there trying to get the thing to be quiet. And because I'm there by myself, I can't play it or I can't play the keyboards through the PA and be up on stage at the same time, whatever. And sometimes it gets quiet because the gain is, I've turned the gain down. And, and that's what happens. So with that in mind, the keyboard player finally kind of relented and said, well, what should I get? And in that case, we went to the music store and we got this 7-channel rack mount PV, and it was great. It was because the grounding was together and it didn't buzz and hum every time you hooked it up. So, sometimes the experience is important to be able to say this piece of equipment is not the right thing. So yes, and over to you, Andrew. Lipnick.
Well, actually, like the RF situation, RF and comms, well, mostly RF, you have a different, like you are always having to adjust and just make it up as you go, because the environment that you're trying to perform your services in, you can't control as much as like speakers and consoles and things. So you are probably doing that more often than most of us.
That may be the actual case, but I don't approach it that way. My approach is that it should be the same every day. And I work, like the job that I do, that I bring to that is working really hard. And yeah, admittedly, some days it's harder than others, but once you've done it, there's a routine to it. I was talking to a mentor or mentee yesterday. Mento? No, those are the little. Anyway, about it was about his career and stuff, and I said, the thing that I've realized about me more than anything else is that I need to have systems. I need to have a system in place for whatever it is I'm doing, an approach. And once you have that and you follow that, then it kind of, comes out the way you want it to most of the time. Anyway, I'm going to throw to Andrew because he's got his left hand up.
Now Drew, but yeah, Andrew, whatever. What we're really all talking about here is managing expectations. And that is a skill I wish I had learned as a very young audio engineer. I did pick it up eventually through the mentors that I had over the years, but I wish someone had just sat me down and said, Andy, it's not just about the gear and the operating of the gear. It's also about how you escalate and de-escalate issues and how you talk to the client, the artist, the producer, so forth and so on. So I'll just say that. And then, yes, I have been in both camps where I got to choose the gear ahead of time, or, hey, here's a pile of gear, make it work. And the pile of gear, like, I'm glad I had that skill. That was a good thing to learn. I think that's a good thing to learn especially when you're coming up, is you're not always going to get the best thing. You're going to get stuff you just have to make work. And you guys have already shared a bunch of stories around that. But the managing the expectations part, getting back to that, for example, and this is what comes up, especially doing corporate events, it's like, oh, and did we tell you we have a band? And they tell you that like a day or two, if you're lucky, before the event, that they throw at you. And then they say, and here's what you have to use for that. And I had one gig in particular where it was like, here's a pile of SM58s. Oh, and by the way, we didn't have any monitor speakers, so here's a bunch of JBL Eons. And this was on a big stage. And I'm like, okay. And I said, I'll make this work somehow, but this is far from perfect. You have a very wide pickup cardioid microphone, and you have a very wide speaker on the floor, and you have a band that's an employee band, so they're not. And so it was like the perfect storm of all these things coming together that made it very difficult. But again, it's managing expectations. And then there's on the other hand, I've had times where they've said, oh, we have a band. I said, oh, okay, can we spec some gear for this band? And it might even be a band that tours, that has some name recognition, or at least is a professional show band of some sort. They're used to a certain level, and then sometimes you get your way, and that's a good thing too.
It's always a good thing when Andrew Lipnick gets his way. I can't believe I'm about to say what I'm going to say, but Joe Foley, we haven't heard much from you.
How is that possible?
Mike was muted.
Mike's broken. Nothing.
That's literally now the best part of the show in the history of the show. I just called on Joe Foley and he was speechless. He had nothing. He had nothing to contribute. It was perfect.
He was distracted.
While he's thinking, we're talking about tweaking the equipment, getting the equipment you really want to have versus making the equipment you've been given to work. And what's in the middle is the client's budget.
Mm-hmm.
And you're always going to be pushing back left, right. And really, it isn't only about PA and mixing. Comms are the same way. You know, you come into a comm system and you want to have a Riedel system and Bolero, and they give you a bunch of BP 325 RTS belt packs and a couple of old power supplies. Well, you do what you have to do to make it work. But the important thing I think to say to the client is, for your tour, there are certain places, certain cities maybe, that will have to have different equipment. We'll have to, because we know that it's not going to work right there. Let's say taking RF equipment into Italy. It's going to be terrible to make your RF equipment work in Italy unless we have a lot of options available. Things like that. And if you're upfront with the client about just giving them some options of things to add without just saying, oh, I don't like that because I don't do shows with purple speakers, particularly tuck and roll. And then they're not going to pay any attention to that. So.
Well, and I think it's a really good, and sorry, Ike, I stepped on you. I think as I'm listening to everybody talking, I'm thinking more and more. I was kind of thinking through my own experience, and most of my early career was I had a project manager that sold a show, designed a system, put it on a truck, put me on a truck with it. I showed up at the gig. I opened the folder and went, what am I doing today? And absolutely, the skill set I built was take this that's in the truck and make this show happen. Because 95% of the shows I were doing were one-off, one-day shows. So there was really no option of, no, I can't do it with this because I'm going to need you to send me down. The details are lost in time, but I distinctly remember being in some relatively large DC venue and getting sent like 6 JF100s. And I mean, for like a 2,500 seat ballroom and having to basically make a show out of it. And it was pretty terrible.
The trick is somehow making the client know that it's not your fault.
Actually, that's perfect.
Without throwing the company under the bus too, because nothing's worse than walking into a venue and the first thing out of the tech's mouth is, "I hate this company. Look at the crap they brought me." Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Whoa. What
did
they just walk into?
That's an old school style of expectation management that I personally have never had any patience for. But one of the things, there's a technique that goes, oh, I don't know if that's going to work. Oh man, you're asking us to do what? Oh man, that's just, and then they pull it off, and it makes you look like a hero because you made it seem so impossible to begin with. I'm seeing less of that now than I used to see, but it was definitely a way that some people made their way in the business.
Well,
but back to Pete's point for a second. One of the things that I still wrestle with, Pete, is I find a lot of people in the industry, even experienced people in the industry, find it really hard to get their head around the idea that you can know what the RF situation is going to be anywhere in advance. And sometimes, I mean, even today I ran into it where I had done coordination for a certain part of what the show we're doing. And I sent the numbers off. This was from my home in Toronto. I sent the numbers off like 2 days ago. And then I got a text from my boss going, oh, I haven't distributed those yet. Did you do your scan in the venue? And it's like, I'm doing it this morning, but I feel quite confident that the numbers that I spat out were, going to work. And in fact, they did. But I've also been in the situation where I've told the sound company, like, in 2 days' time, we're going to be in this venue, which is like, 30 miles from your shop in that market. And the stuff that we have is seriously going to have a problem in that venue. And I was basically told, like, just deal with it. You're a pro, just deal with it, and it's like, that's not really the answer that I was looking for. And I did know in advance that it was going to be a problem. Back to you, Andy.
I was going to say, I when I was touring in Europe, I found it very interesting to me that the sound company would send me a list every day of here's what your frequencies are going to be. Before I had scanned or anybody had scanned, they said, here's what your frequencies need to be today, because they always have to register them and pay licenses on them. So they do that all ahead of time. So you can have, you'll have a list for the entire tour of every venue, what your frequencies will be ahead of time. Now, I guess it's slightly different because the fact that they have to prepay them, they already register them and they don't necessarily have to scan for those. They know that those are going to be okay. But it's an interesting difference between North America and Europe in that.
I was sending coordinations to the company that did the licensing. There was a company that was an intermediary between the tour and the regulatory body. So I would send them a coordination saying, this is Glasgow. This is what I would like to use in Glasgow. And then typically I would get something back going, well, this is good and this is good and this is good, but can you do something about this couple of frequencies or something like that? And there was a bit of haggling back and forth. But I guess on some levels that you probably are just getting numbers from Ofcom in the UK and say, dude, do it.
Well, we only had 8 channels, so it wasn't like we had a ton. So they gave us a dozen channels, said, pick from these 12. These are the ones that we paid for. Don't do anything else, otherwise we're going to kill you. So, but they always worked every day, so it was fine.
Jump in there, Pete.
Oh, yeah. Back 2 things. The first one is that luckily the industry has adjusted away from the throw everything in the truck and figure it out, mostly because I think it was costing clients too much money. And so then clients reverted away from the sales guy that didn't know anything. And I mean, we see it all around, and maybe it's just a change in generations, but people now want to talk to the person that will actually be putting things together and give an accurate price or an accurate design to get a price and go from there. And luckily the industry has transitioned that. I mean, when I first started off, it was full on put a bunch of stuff in a semi truck and ride in the sleeper to the arena and then set it all up. And hopefully the band will be happy. We would get riders that morning while we're loading in from the promoter. And, one instance of that, I did a lot of stuff at the Palace in Detroit, which is now called something else. But I won't name names, but the act came in and his rider said 8 subs aside, and we had 6. And he was also the production manager, so he refused to call the band in for rehearsal unless there was 2 more subs aside. And
of any brand, it didn't matter. It
didn't even matter. Well,
they got to be 6 or 8 of them.
Yeah, he cared about he cared about the quantity. And later, I'll tell you guys who this was. You'll be like, oh yeah, but
the roots.
The promoter, so he was basically like, there's not going to be a show unless I have 4 more subs per side. Now, I was the front of house and PA tech for it, and the promoter was doing this to the PA owner who happened to be there that day. So they went and got 4 more subs, charged the band $3,000 or something.
And hopefully
for
didn't even plug them in. Hopefully,
well, yeah, that was my idea. We threw him up on top, and because this guy was so short, I was like, he couldn't even reach the third one up, let alone the fourth one up. And we plugged them in the EP6s. This is how long ago it was. We plugged the EP6s in, and then I just chucked the cable under the stage. Like, he isn't gonna look. And like, the show, the subs were barely even on, like, at all, so, but luckily we're mostly past those days because of the leaps and bounds that we've had in PA technology, that and the education in PA. I mean, I remember when when VDOS first came out and these guys were like, oh yeah, I don't like that PA. It's too accurate. It's too loud. It's this or that. And because all these front of house mixers had been used to mixing off of like the limiters or whatever limitations there are with those types of 850s or flashlight floodlight or whatever. And so our department was slowest to mature out of all the departments of live eventing, because the physics of moving air is never gonna change. We still need that physics there.
I just love the person that comes in and looks at the PA and goes, "That's not going to work," before they've even listened to it. This idea of also the we were talking earlier about knowing when this is a piece of equipment that's not going to do the job. Nothing's more frustrating than these people that come in and go, "That's not what I didn't ask for that. This not ask for it. This is not going to do the job." And they've never seen it before.
No, and he didn't even, in that instance, he didn't even listen to it. Right. He just was like, my rider says.
We've all run into that. And it's like, and of course, there's the person that you couldn't get a hold of it during the advance. But hopefully you're saying that this is changing. I really hope it is, because every time I advance a corporate show, I can never get the person to talk about the equipment they're providing or put me in touch with the actual tech that's going to be there. Nothing's more frustrating than talking to the salesman who goes, yeah, we got all that covered. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. You show up there and it's a whole different rig and you're going, well, and the guy comes here and goes, well, this is what they told me to bring. Well, I never talked to you. I don't know who you are. And anyway, I hope that's changing. I really do, because it's never been good.
It helps that you put the hierarchies in there. Like the production manager talks to the producer in a corporate situation. Production manager talks to the producer and requests that the two audio guys get together. And
sometimes they won't let you, though. They won't even tell you their name or their phone number or anything. It's like,
I used to get asked that question a lot when I used to advance shows when I was managing a sound company in the 90s. I would go through it, and the last question is, are you going to be there? And
right.
It was like,
are you going to be there?
Actually, I'm not going to be there, but I will absolutely guarantee you that this list of equipment that I just went through with you will be there, will be working, and so on and so forth. And it always was. So I never felt, any twinge about saying that, but it really always used to surprise me that was always the last question. Like, will you be there? It's like, nope, not me. Anyway, that's enough of me. Ike out.
I think I've had the fortunate to be on the side of being, one, the sales guy who sold the show, two, the audio tech who set up the PA and advanced the show, three, also talk to the sound technician if there's a guest band and found out what their rider was and make sure we had a copy of it. And also being at all the meetings possible with the event meeting planner to make sure that, one, we had a sketch of the room layout, knew where everything was, so that all these things were always advanced by me. And when you get to the town, all you need is a group of loaders, people to help you load in. You already know where you're going to rig your truss. You already know where you're going to tie in. You know when you're going to expect the meeting to be over to see the band walking in and the head technician walking in. You're already read as a writer. So, I think preparation is everything. And lucky for me, I've had a chance to be the guy on everything. So if I'm going to get some flack, I'm going to stand strong and get the flack because I might have missed the meeting or something like that. I didn't cross an I, or didn't dot I, cross the T. So I think prep is everything.
Yeah, prep is everything, and it's super handy if you can be the guy from the top to the bottom. So then the only person you have to blame is yourself, Kate.
Well, I was going to say, Andy, sometimes I'm on the other side of that where I really want to talk to like the touring audio person, because it's like engineers just want to talk to engineers. That's just how it is. We're never going to not want to talk to each other.
Of course.
But there's so many layers of management on the other side where, and on my side of things, where there's almost like a fear of us getting together and agreeing. And
well, they're going to ask for way more things than I can afford. I don't want them to.
Exactly.
You know, usually it's just going over the rider and being like, are you cool with this DI instead?
Totally. And
how serious are you about
this? The stupid thing is generally we're going to want to make the day go well for everyone.
Yeah.
And they always have this fear, oh, they're going to ask for an extra this or the extra that. It's going to cost us more money. No, I just want to know what I'm walking into. You know, I understand budgets. That's no problem. So yeah.
Yeah. And typically I found too is the fear of two audio engineers getting together and cooking up ideas causes like a bunch of managers and a giant conference call. We need to have 7 other people. And
we can't let them talk to each other. Only bad things could possibly happen from this.
The audio budget will always be less than the video, the lighting budget, and it'll always be less than the video budget. So our part of it
from the other side too. I mean, sometimes the ideas start coming thick and fast. And actually, with that same band, I used to have an expression where somebody go, "Oh, you know, maybe we could put the piano on the other side of the stage and do this and have, you know, I was thinking about doing this." I go, you know, first there's on, and then there's concepts. And right now we're working on because, you know, it'd be like this has always come up when the day that the PA was like the most screwed up thing that you walked into. Production denied, I used to call those gigs. And you know, it was like just the worst thing. That would be the day that, oh yeah, I was thinking of redoing the stage layout. Nope. Today we're just working on getting the PA to turn on. Then we, you know, tomorrow or something, or tonight on the bus or something, we can talk about the new arrangement, but not now.
I agree, Kate, like engineers want to talk to engineers. I have had a couple situations where their engineer spoke out of turn and approved a bunch of stuff. However, because it was a broadcast and the band was endorsed, he actually was like out of line. And you know, I basically had to do a different PA system and like a major, like lots of speakers. It was fine in the end, but there are situations where like both organizations are so big that I'll use whatever PA. And it's like, no, actually like the PA's on camera and we're endorsed by these people and blah, blah, blah. But, and then the other one is that like usually it's the end clients booking the bands and signing their contracts before anything else has been, like even before the show has been confirmed. And so like, you know, I've had crazy stuff like 2 day, you know, a 30-day corporate show, 20,000 people in a convention center. And like 2 days before the band shows up, they tell you that they're bringing their South American container in. That's all 240 power. And can we supply a service that's European power? And like, sure, no problem. It's a corporate show. We'll figure it out. Like it's going to cost some money.
Just do the gig at Kate's venue.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Problem.
At least you had 2 days.
Solved.
Jeez. Sometimes you have 2 minutes.
I think one of my favorite moments was having the bass player from a band come up to me as the system tech and inform me that we had enough speakers. That wasn't our problem. But you really need more amplifiers.
You don't have enough amplifiers for this. I have actually shown up on a job where there were 12 speakers on the truck and 7 speaker cables. So, you know, there are times when, you know, I did actually have to push back a little and go, if you want me to use all of these, I'm going to need some more gear because all of these will not make sound unless I have wires to plug into them. But all kidding aside, this conversation, you know, like all of these things that we have, to me, it once again falls on a continuum. It's like, it's not really so much, you know, oh, it takes more skill to be the person who takes a blank piece of paper and makes a perfect show, or it takes more skill to be the person who walks in and just makes it happen.
Pete nailed it at the beginning. He said it depends.
I mean, my reality is somewhere in between. You know, I do almost exclusively corporate audio at this point, and have for quite a while. There are 2 or 3 things that if the client is not going to provide those for my show, I'm going to get super, super whiny or manage expectations. As Mr. Lipnick said, I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to, if you're going to put a panel of lavs on stage and you're not going to give me an auto mixer, we're going to have a bad time.
I was just going to ask you what those things were.
Yeah, you already know what those things are. But then there's a whole nother set of things that it's like, these are my preferences. It would be nice if I had, but you know what? It's not the end of the world. And then the other aspect of this, I'm now far enough down the road in my career, and there's been it's been a while since I spec'd out a really big, very long time since I spec'd out a really big PA. I wouldn't even feel qualified to do that. Like I would want to work with somebody like Pete or somebody like Kate, and I would, it's like, what's the venue? What do you guys have? Tell me what would work good in that, and bring that, please. There's a big show that I did up until recently, because there was apparently some sort of worldwide thing that happened that caused a lot of large events to stop happening. But
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I have no idea what I'm talking about. But it was a big event in a big arena, big corporate event, very challenging, blah, 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 blah. But the account rep and, audio head of the company I was working with was, on the phone with me asking what I wanted for PA. And I basically told him, I said, your gear, you know what you've got. You're a very smart guy. You can put up a system. I said, I know this is a big client for you. Just build me a car and I will make sure I don't hit the wall. So as long as you build a car that will go around the track really, really fast, I will do my part to make sure it doesn't hit the wall. And, 2 or 3 times he'd call me back and go, I'm thinking about that. I'm like, I trust you. Build the car and I'll make sure it doesn't hit the wall. And
it really does come down to trust. I'm like, I don't really care about anything other than like placement and just tell me what you have. And then we'll go from there.
And that trust, I think, is largely built on convincing the person who's the decision maker, is this a want or a need? They want to know, is this something you absolutely need, or is it just something you want to have on the show?
And if you absolutely need it, why don't you bring it yourself?
Or you better really need it.
There is that, there is that, like, Brian, you brought up, the auto mixing thing, it's like the console doesn't have Dugan built in, or you don't have the card for it, or whatever it is, it's like, do you bring it? And then do you charge for it? I mean, that's a whole nother discussion here. But,
yeah, that's definitely a whole nother discussion. But
needs, I think wants and needs, if the person you're communicating with, if they really trust that you are like, no, this is really a need of the show, it will make everything better significantly, and everybody will feel how that is really better, then yeah.
But I think also to keep in mind, my motto was, I'd rather be looking at it than looking for it.
I like that. I like
that. That
your
saves your bacon.
Yep,
so
I like that.
The warehouse if you have to.
Yep, I like that. We've had a bunch of good thoughts. We're coming up on about an hour, and we usually like to keep this down to a reasonable amount of time so we can go immediately into the post show and say a whole bunch of secret stuff that you guys never get to hear. So if you want to be a part of this conversation, and you're watching this later on the YouTubes, you'll see in the description a little linky thing to send me a note, and you can be part of this conversation. The only qualification is that you're interested in audio and you like to argue about things. That's pretty much it. No other qualifications necessary. We let Joe in. I mean, that's all I have to say.
Oh, Joe.
You know, my
Look at that
final,
background. I love
yes, we've never seen that one before.
No.
My final thoughts on this topic, because I actually didn't talk too much for once in my life.
This is the quietest you've ever been.
Yeah, well, everybody else had so much to add, but again, I'm was thinking through my own career and realizing that I very much am a take what's in front of me and get the best possible thing out of it person, because that's what I started doing, and that's what I learned how to do. And if I'm 100% honest, if somebody just was like, I'm writing you a blank check, this is the show I want to do, tell me everything you want and I'll just make it happen, I would probably be calling up Pete, or I'd be calling up Kate, or I'd be calling up, Andy or somebody and going, help me spec out the best stuff for this, because that's not my skill set. The skill set that continues to serve me even to today is I show up. I had a show a couple of years ago in Vegas, and it was I don't want to name names. I'm kind of with you, Pete. I don't want to name names, but I was supposed to get one kind of speaker system that has one particular name that starts with D and B, and I got another speaker system that has those two letters in it but isn't D and B, and I only got a third of it because the rest was coming, and it was coming pretty much all the way until we loaded out. It never actually arrived. And it was definitely a situation where it was just like, well, what's in the building? What can we put up? Where can I put it? How can I hang it? I hadn't had to do that kind of thing in years and years and years, but I was really glad that I had the ability to, and the client was okay with the result at the end. They weren't overwhelmingly happy, but they understood that it was outside of my control because I had been, we had spec'd one thing and then the vendors just straight up didn't provide it. And for contractual reasons, there wasn't any way to get it. So anyway, it's an interesting conversation. And I have to say that, I have a lot of respect for the folks that can, give me a thing and I'll spec the entire thing top to bottom and the result will be amazing, because it's not really a skill set I necessarily have. So it's, there is no which one is the better skill. That's my final thoughts on it. It depends, which is pretty much the answer to every question is it depends. Because that's the thing that picks up everything. So it's the thing that catches everything.
And
depends.
Just to be clear about this, we're all getting up in years, so depends makes a lot of sense.
This is where I'm going.
Where depends.
I mean, I'm demobilizing a warehouse that's full of adult diapers right now, Pete and everyone. Just let me know.
Will you ship me a box?
Y'all do realize we're still live. Okay. So I want to thank everybody for joining me for today's show. Special thank you to Kate and Angelo for being brave enough to come on for the first time, and great conversation.
Excellent topic.
Excellent topic. I may not see y'all for a little bit because I have to go to a foreign country and do some sporting event thing.
We may be on hiatus for a couple of weeks. I've actually got a gig.
So keep, stay tuned with your emails as far as what the schedule will be like for the next several weeks. But in the meantime, thank you everybody for being here, and we're going to wave everybody goodbye as Andy rolls that fabulous bean footage.
Yeah, well, that's like just your opinion, man.